down here at the Lyric Theater, the People's Town Hall with John Yarmuth. Got lots of people checking in here. Concession stand is open. This is the People's Town Hall. John Yarmuth will be speaking. Auditorium at the Lyric is filling up. The press is here. We got lots of young Dems here. We got lots of old Dems here. We got lots of people from lots of organizations. Jordan Lloyd. The Hills. We got lots of people here. Audience is filling up.
He takes it off and changes it.
Adam Moore, Sherilyn Stevenson, Deborah Alexander.
So that,
And, excuse me.
in the middle, technology and plays the
Outside the middle.
And we got Jay Phillips. We got the young Dems and the old Dems here.
All Dems, that's me.
How are you? How are you? Hi. How are you? Got a really good turnout.
Gonna be included? Sure.
Thank you.
Hey, Sarah.
Hello.
How are you?
Mr. Eddie. Lyric is beautiful if you've not been to the Lyric Theater. People are still checking in. Andy Barr. Again, if you've not seen the Lyric Theater, you need to.
I had to take a point of privilege to speak to you really quick. I'm the executive director here. My name is Christian Adair. I always have to I have to tell people a little bit about the Lyric because sometimes you're a first-time visitor. All right, your first-time visitor. The Lyric, Historic Lyric Theater and Cultural Arts Center, is a place of diversity, inclusion, inspiration, and love. Every time someone leaves here, you leave here happy. You meet somebody new, and you're in a historic space because this place at one time was the only place that Black people could go to watch movies, to see entertainers, and to be an entertainer. This is where famous people came to do their craft. They were on the Chitlin Circuit, from James Brown, Tina Turner, Count Basie, and those people wasn't even famous yet, but they came here to perform because it was the only place they were allowed to be in during those times when we had unjust laws. Which I guess you guys are here because it seems like we're going back. But we're not going back. So I welcome you and I appreciate you and I encourage you to return. We have a cultural center, we have an art gallery, we have a community engagement space, and we have this place where you come to as a platform to hear voices and to be heard. So enjoy your evening. I hope you guys get some good marching orders, and let's go out here and make sure that this place remains a place that is about diversity, equity, inclusion, and love.
Hi, everybody. My name is Eaves, and I am the Executive Director of the Kentucky Democratic Party. And just in case Andy Barr says otherwise, I'm not a paid actor, not funded by George Soros, and yes, I am a registered registered voter in Kentucky's 6th Congressional District. But I'm also one of the least important people here tonight because everybody in the audience, and then we still have folks filtering in, which is amazing, every single one of you are the important people here tonight. And you and tens of thousands of other voters across the country are upset, you're angry, you're scared, you're unsure, and you're being ignored by the very people who are charged and paid to represent you. So even though Andy Barr won't show up to talk to you, yes, we will. And I wanted to bring some friends tonight because we can't do this alone. Democracy is a group effort. So I'd like you all to give it up for our chair of the Kentucky Democratic Party, Coleman Elridge. And this next guy is pretty special. For a long time, he was our only Democrat representing us in Congress. Of course, now Morgan McGarvey has taken his place and is doing an amazing job. But former Congressman John Yarmuth represented Kentucky's 3rd Congressional District for 16 years. He served as the chair of the House Budget Committee, during which time he authored and spearheaded the passage of the American Rescue Plan Act, which provided life-changing and transformative support and relief to millions of Americans during the COVID pandemic. And we're all better because he served us. So, Congressman.
Well, thanks everybody. It's great to be here. Thanks, Morgan. Coleman, great to be with you. This is exciting. I have not been able to get my juices going for a while, even though I sit at home and stew like many of you do every day. So I thought that this would actually be kind of not necessarily an anger management session, although it probably is some of that, but maybe an anger channeling session, because that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
When I decided to retire back in, I made the decision back in 2021. I did so partially because I didn't think after the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act, that there was another act for me. I said, okay, it's the time to drop the mic. And I never in the world thought that Donald Trump would be returned to the White House. I'm not sure I would have stepped down if I had known that was going to happen. But we are where we are. You know, I looked out the other day, I looked at the definition of retire. And retire means, of course, stop working, which I've sort of done. But it also means retreat from risk or danger. And I ain't doing that. And there is plenty of risk and danger out there. You know, tonight, this is a Democratic Party event, but I'm not going to talk to you as a Democrat necessarily. And I don't want you to think of yourselves as Democrats tonight. I want you to think about your role in today's America. And the way I see my role, and I hope you do too, is as a freedom fighter. Because our freedoms are very much at stake every day. You know, back in 2019, I gave a speech in Louisville to the Rotary Club, and the speech was about something totally different. But I started by saying, you know, this is during Trump's first term. I started by saying, I'm not going to talk about this. I'm not going to elaborate it, but I'm going to make one statement to you. And that statement is, if you don't think that we are as close to losing our democracy as we've ever been, you're not paying attention. I left it at that. Six years later, the threat is 100 times greater. 100 times at least. And every day we're seeing it, and I'm not going to elaborate on everything, I'm going to talk about some of them. But we're here tonight primarily because of Andy Barr. Because he's not. Because he doesn't want to hear from the constituents who elected him. And, you know, I served 10 years with Andy. And I was on a lot of programs with him, and I was, you know, we would show up to meet together with various groups. And one thing always struck me about Andy, and Andy's not a dumb guy. I mean, I think everybody will admit he's not a dumb guy. But what always astounded me about Andy is everything that came out of his mouth could not possibly have been connected to his brain. What it was connected to was his knee-jerk, partisan positions and things that he would never be able to defend. Andy argued by talking a long time. That's what he does. He does filibuster. But what I was always amazed about Andy Barr, again, decent guy, tragic situation with losing his wife, but I never heard a novel or creative idea come out of him. But now he's forced to defend a policy and an administration, both of which are indefensible, which is why he won't show up to meet his constituents. Now, I know he held a telephone town hall on Monday, and I used to do telephone town halls too. They are a great tool when done correctly. And when they're done correctly, what you would do, and we would do this, we'd say, okay, we're going to make 50,000 phone calls. We had 50,000 automated calls. They went out to people in the community, whichever part of the district we wanted to reach. We'd say, we're going to do a telephone town hall 2 days later, 6 o'clock. You'll get another call. And if you want to participate in the telephone town hall, just hang on the line. And we would have several thousand people on the line. And it was, again, a great tool. We were able to, we had people were getting phone calls from us, which by themselves are important things. So what does Andy do? He forces you to register, if you can. He controlled every bit of it. It was hard to tune in. And then when you did, he said the most outrageous things. So, for instance, he apparently said that Donald Trump is working to protect the bourbon industry.
Oh my God. Yeah, right.
I'm not making this up. Maybe it was a false account, but that's what I read. Donald Trump is the threat to the bourbon industry. He's the one who's causing the problem. And Andy is co-chair of the Bourbon Caucus in Congress, which I founded. So, it's pretty interesting. But what he and others are doing now is they have fallen into this, their MO is now total gaslighting. I mean, how much gaslighting is there when, with this current situation with the chat and the attack and with the Houthis, and all the Republicans are saying, there's no confidential information there, no classified information. Well, if what they were posting online is not classified information, then we got to question our classification system. But this is what they do. They gaslight or they lie. So it's kind of like the GOP is now the gaslight and perjury party. If you think about what they have proposed in the budget that they're trying to pass through reconciliation, I'm not going to go in the weeds on that, but their big plan, one of those things is that they were directed in their budget to cut $880 billion over 10 years from the Energy and Commerce Committee's jurisdiction. Now, we can talk to Brett Guthrie about that, because Brett is now chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee. He has to find $880 billion over 10 years. What's in his jurisdiction? The only major funding thing that's in his jurisdiction? Medicaid. Can you imagine what cutting anywhere close to $880 billion over 10 years from Medicaid would do to Kentucky? 1 out of 4 Kentuckians gets their health insurance through Medicaid, almost 50% of children. In most of Kentucky, the hospitals are kept alive by Medicaid. If Medicaid goes away or gets substantially cut, those hospitals disappear, which means people don't get health care. They have to drive hours and hours and hours if they can do that. Plus, they're always one of the largest employers in some of these counties in Kentucky. All that goes away. What do they say? Oh, we're just going after fraud and abuse. No, they're going after Kentuckians. They're going after people who need long-term care, because 80% of long-term care is paid for by Medicaid. But they say nothing to see here, nothing to see here. In the Agriculture Committee, they have to cut $300 billion. What's in the Agriculture Committee? SNAP. That's the largest part of the Agriculture Committee's jurisdiction. In Kentucky, in the 6th district, 100,000 people roughly are recipients of SNAP benefits. That's true in almost every congressional district in Kentucky. In Hal Rogers' district in Appalachia, 27% of the population is on SNAP. But they want to cut hundreds of billions of dollars from SNAP. What's the other thing that's in the agriculture budget? Farm subsidies. Farmers all over Kentucky and all over the country will be suffering from the cuts that they're proposing. They say, and I urge you all to go in and read the bills. A lot of it's just numbers, so don't just go to the end. Read the policy statements in it, because they're hysterical. They talk about balancing the budget. That's what they want to do. Their budget adds $18 trillion to the national debt. Right there in black and white, it's their own words, $18 trillion over 10 years they add to the national debt, yet they say they're trying to balance the budget. Now, you would think with all these massive cuts that they're proposing to Medicaid, to SNAP, to long-term care, to the CHIP program, to farm subsidies, to veterans benefits, I haven't talked about that, but veterans as well, you'd think that they would be able to actually make an impact on the deficit and the debt. But they don't, because $4.5 trillion worth of tax cuts. $4.5 trillion worth of tax cuts. So they're penalizing all of people who need support to give tax cuts to the very wealthy. And we've got this megalomaniac, Elon Musk, up there urging him on. Guy's only worth, whatever, $1 trillion. He's getting close to it. Well, his stock's been hurt, so we won't. But this is what we're faced with. And I always said there's one fundamental difference between Democrats and Republicans. Here I'm going to talk as a Democrat more than a freedom fighter. Democrats always support policies that hopefully make life easier for people. Republicans consistently do things that makes life harder for people. So, as part of this new DOGE program, one of the things they're doing is cutting a lot of costs in Social Security, including closing the Social Security office in Hazard. Yeah, they're closing the office in Hazard, which means that somebody who has a question about their benefits or has a problem with it, they're also cutting back the phone services, and so you can't use the phone. So somebody in Hazard's going to have to drive 5, 6, 7 hours to another office, if they can do that, to get their questions answered. Again, making life harder for people. We tried to forgive student loans and make student loans affordable. What do? They end all the programs that we created by executive order, and now by trying to kill the Department of Education. Trying to make it harder to get an education, not easier. Housing, you name it. Republicans want to make it harder, Democrats want to make it easier. So, and we can talk about policy, and we'll talk about it during Q&A, but I want to go on to the freedom fighting portion of my comments and my concern. What we're seeing now on a daily basis is the most dangerous and overwhelming attack on the fundamental precepts of our society that we have ever seen. So, what are they going after? They're going after the courts, justices, threatening to impeach judges who don't rule the way they want to. Supreme Court Chief Justice had to even make a statement saying, this is not what we do. We don't impeach judges when they decide something we don't like. But they're trying to do that. They're going after our colleges, threatening them with cutting off funding. We're getting that in Kentucky as well from the General Assembly. They're going after lawyers now. Any lawyer who represents some entity that the administration didn't like, they're going after. They fired the head of the Kennedy Center, something that has always been incredibly bipartisan and has been held up as, as one of the great models of supporting American culture, and they politicized that. One thing after another, they are trying to unravel the foundations of our democracy. Well, they definitely lie. There's no question about that. And here's one of the things that, going back to Andy Barr for a second, and all the sycophants that there are now in Congress and elsewhere. When you endorse or repeat a lie, you're lying yourself.
Yes. Yes.
You are a liar if you're doing that. You don't have to speak the word. And one of the great tragedies in this country right now is that we have one political party that is so fearful of one man that they don't dare say, hey, the guy's lying, it's not true. I mean, how many people stood up in the last couple of days to say, this shouldn't have happened. They shouldn't have been doing that. This was classified information. one guy did, Don Bacon from Nebraska. He's the only one I've heard. Everybody else is crickets. It's just disgusting, including, of course, Andy Barr. So I'm going to sit down in a second and we can answer. I want to answer your questions, but here's what a good buddy of mine and I think a national icon said the other day, Jamie Raskin. Jamie said, yeah, we in Congress need to fight, and we in Congress need to do everything we can to push back against the challenges, threats to democracy that we're seeing. But the people need to be with us. The people need to be out there too. And to be honest, I think a lot of us, I know this when I was serving, a lot of us think, okay, we sent people to Washington to do that, to save us, to protect us, to work for us. That doesn't always work. Doesn't always work. I've said a few times last couple of days, and I probably shouldn't say it in public, but I'm going to say it again. People say to us all the time, oh, the Democratic messaging sucks, it's just awful. It's not the Democratic messaging. It's voters. It's voters. Unless the voters rise up and hold people accountable for the pain that they cause and the damage they do, we will continue to do it. So I ask you to consider yourself a freedom fighter. This is, I was just about 3 or 4 years too young to be a freedom fighter in the 60s. And I'd like to think that if I had been a little older, I would have been one of those. Now's our chance. And the threat to our country is just as great. So let's get out and make sure we do everything we can. I know we'll get questions as to what we can do as citizens, but we do have the power. Ultimately, we do have the power. And we need to wield it, and we need to get everybody we can to join us in that fight. So, one of the first fights, next year, open seat in the 6th Congressional District. National Democratic Party has made this a target district. They think we can flip this seat.
All right.
And we don't have to beat Andy Barr. He's trying to get some other job, it looks like. But this is a race that we can all be dedicated to. And again, one of the things that we too often lose sight of, the place where things happen in government that most directly impact our lives, Frankfurt, Lexington, Fayette, Louisville Metro, state and local government, school boards, every race matters. We just one glimmer of hope, a race yesterday in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I don't even have to talk to this crowd. You all can get this speech, I think. But a state senate district that went for Donald Trump by 15 points went to a Democrat. In a special election, so we can hope that that's a harbinger of things to come, but we need to do our part as well. So, well, I look forward to a great conversation. Thanks for having me, and thanks for being here.
Into a great segue, which is if you'll all take out your phones and text Town Hall to 43367. We're gonna have a lot of questions tonight about what folks can do now. That is how we get your information to turn you into volunteers between now and 2026. because it's simply too important to just vote. We've got to do more than vote. So if you'll text that number, we will turn you into volunteers between now and 2026, which is a great action item we can all leave here with. So I thank you all for submitting your questions as you came in. We have 2 microphones on either side of the auditorium, and I'm going to call out the names of the individuals who submitted their questions, and you'll stand up or walk to the middle of the aisle, whatever you want, and one of our staff members will get you a mic. So our first question will be from Carol Frazier from Lexington, Kentucky. Where are you, Carol? Hi, Carol.
Hi, thank you. My question is about Social Security, and what is the plan the Democrats have to protect Social Security? Because if you shut down all of the locations, or most of the locations, and you cut down the staff, it's just going to fall apart. So I think half of us, 3/4 of us, are pretty much worried about that.
There are 2 parts to that. What are we going to do right now? This has to be a judicial activity. There'll be a lot of court cases on this. So far, by the way, there have been over 100 challenges to Trump policies. Of all the ones that have been decided, I think 46 have gone against the administration's actions, and only 1 or 2 support itself. I'm hopeful that'll happen. Long term, Democrats actually have a long-term proposal to stabilize Social Security and to actually be able to increase benefits. And it involves eliminating part of the donut hole and taxing high-end income and so forth. And John Yarmuth from Connecticut has proposed that for several years now, and hopefully we can take control of the House next year and push that. I mean, obviously it's going to be hard with unless we get the Senate as well and a White House that's friendlier. But I think when you're talking Social Security has always been what they call the third rail. You don't mess with Social Security. And I think there'll be a huge political price to pay if they persist in this attack on Social Security services.
Thank you, Carol. Our next question is from Bud Andrews. Bud, where are you?
Yo!
Somebody get this man a mic. He seems eager.
Hi, I'm Bud. I served 25 years in the United States Army active duty. Since I retired, I am solely dependent on the VA healthcare system. I attend the VA here in Lexington. It is rated one of the top 5 VAs in the country. They have 100 staff, and they do their best. The other day I was over there, and I was talking to a physician's assistant who works in the ER. He said, Bud, they told us to anticipate a 15 to 20% cut in personnel. He said we cannot sustain that. We cannot serve veterans. You're going to have to wait for your appointments. Your care is going to diminish. My question is, allegedly the GOP is they're all for veterans. And we're going to make America great again. So how can they cut my health care and fire us veterans in record numbers? And what if we as veterans can convince politicians that we matter? Thank you.
But first of all, felt that love from across the room, but thank you for your service. Thank you for everything you've done to protect this nation. And you know, we say that, and it can't just be lip service, right? We say that, we hear politicians, not John, say that as if it's just something that we're supposed to say, but if you listen to what Bud's question is, what we get to the root of is, if we're thanking you for your service, then we have to keep our commitment to you. Which is that if you wear the uniform of these United States, then our commitment to you in part is that we will provide you the care that is not a handout, you have earned. Right? And so the quick answer to Bud's question of how can Republicans claim to care about veterans and try to decimate their health care at the same time is they can't.
They lie.
They can't. It is a lie, and we have to call it out as such. The question is, as the congressman said so eloquently, is what are we going to do about it? And this is one of those moments where we can't let veterans fight that battle by themselves. They have fought the battles for us. We have to stand up and fight the battles for them. And if Andy Barr is not going to stand up for our veterans, then one thing is for sure, we have to mobilize to make sure that there are consequences for that, right? We have to make sure that as he's auditioning for another job, which he's not gonna get, you know, I'm probably gonna be in trouble for saying this, but you know, they're talking about DEI. He is a he's DEI hire for Senate if there was ever one. Woefully unqualified for it, but thinks he is. We can't let him have that, but we also have to make sure that in between, we are mobilizing and doing the things that we need to do to make sure that they don't get their way of decimating veterans' health care. But that also gets to a larger question, and we may have a question about it, but I want to tie this together very quickly. What they are doing to our veterans is what they have done to our healthcare system as a whole. And we have to acknowledge that as well. That it used to be the third rail as it was for Social Security to mess with veterans' health care, but it has not been a third rail to mess with the health care or sick care as it has been for everyday citizens. And we have to mobilize around that as well, because if not, we're going to continue to see this Trump administration roll back the progress that we have made, especially in places like Kentucky, where under Democratic leadership, we've begun to make progress in terms of the health outcomes of communities that have been long devastated by not having access to quality and affordable health care. We've made gains in making sure that communities that have been devastated by not having quality and affordable health care in their communities, and not just urban areas, places in eastern Kentucky, where, you know, I have friends that live there that have said, you know, I had to drive 2 and 3 hours to get to Lexington to get the care that I needed. Under Andy Barr and Democratic governors and Democratic leaders, we've made gains in that. Andy Barr and Republicans want to roll those things back. So as we are standing up for veterans, we also have to make sure that we are standing up for our neighbors and ourselves to make sure that health care, as we say and we have to affirm, is a human right. Yeah. Whether you're a veteran, whether you're in the
Just want to add one thing to VA. Morgan McGarvey's on the Veterans Committee, and he's doing a great job of standing up for veterans. One of the things that I hope that Democrats in Congress will do in the House is, even though it is a totally symbolic thing, is start filing impeachment legislation against these cabinet officials who estimate programs like they won't go anywhere. They won't go anywhere. They probably won't even get a vote. But we can introduce them. We can impeach the Secretary of Defense. We can impeach the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. We can do that and call attention to the fact that these people are violating the oath that they take when they assume those positions.
Great question, Bud, and some very good answers from our panelists. All right, the next one will be Carol McKee from Lexington. Carol, where are you? Right here. Lucas.
Thank you for taking my question. I'm very concerned about, I don't care what comes up each day and we see on TV or we hear what's happening. It seems that the Republicans are totally afraid of Donald Trump and the people who are fighting with him. What can we do, or our legislators do, to stop this from happening and for them to recognize that they have constituents that don't feel the way they do? We've got to do something to stop this. It's getting totally, totally out of control.
Well, as I said before, until these people are held accountable by voters, they're going to continue to do what they do. And elections have consequences, and unfortunately, you would hope that when a member of Congress, Andy Barr or whomever, takes the oath of office to preserve and protect the Constitution of the United States, we all take the same oath, that they would think about the fact that when they don't stand up to MAGA initiatives, that they are violating their oath of office. And we've got a Constitution that has an amendment that says if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen. Trump wants to do away with that by executive order. Now, he's not going to get away with it, but he does that, and not one member of the Republican membership of the House of Representatives says anything to resist it. And so, but I think we are showing up in numbers because they're not held accountable, because they get away with it. That's why they do it. That's why they continue to do it, because they get away with it. They're all afraid of either being primaried, or in some cases, Donald Trump instilling such anger in his base that they come after them physically. I mean, they're all afraid for their physical well-being, as well as being primaried in an election. So, it's up to us. There's no answer. There's no institutional answer to that. That's all I can say. It's all about elections. It's all about showing up. I mean, people are showing up. Whatever it was, 1,000 people showed up for the one Andy missed the other day. That's making an impact, and it's happening all over the country. So keep showing up and get your friends to show up. And one of the things that becomes very obvious when you sit in, as I did for 16 years, and you're in the middle of all this stuff, and you realize how, I'll be gentle here, how many low information voters there are out there. How many people who really don't understand what is going on, they don't understand because they watch Fox News or they're on social media, they're in their own bubble, media bubble, that they don't understand that this administration is threatening the Medicaid program, is threatening Social Security, is threatening veterans care. They just don't know it. If they knew it, I think we'd get a different response, a wider response in resistance to what they're doing. So part of our role as Democrats and hopefully as freedom fighters is an educational one. It's not coming up with 10-page policy statements telling people what we're going to do for them. No, it's educating them as to what's going on and how this impacts their lives. We're playing, generally, we've been playing in recent years on a playing field that the other side has created. We're worried about transgender athletes when basically, they're worried about it. They're trying to make that the playing field. We're talking about transgender athletes, we're talking about abortion, we're talking about all these culture wars things, instead of talking about the price of eggs, healthcare, retirement security, the things that really matter to people's lives. We have to change the playing field there and play on our terms, because the people of the United States and the people of this Commonwealth agree with Democrats on policy, on almost every policy. There was a poll during the governor's race a couple of years ago where they polled about 12 different issues. On every issue except one, a significant majority of Kentuckians, 60% or more, agreed with the Democratic policy, not the Republican. And yet we have 75% in the state house and 31-7 in the 80. That's right, 80. I'm sorry, and 31-7 in the state senate. So people are not connecting what these politicians do and say with their own lives, and that's the responsibility and the challenge that we have.
And I want to plug, I want to tie in a little bit of kind of my action ask at the beginning to text Town Hall to that number. And it's because, as the congressman said, it's up to us to educate voters. And the sad reality is that everybody who shows up tonight, not everybody will work to change voters' minds by putting in the work on the ground. Showing up is amazing. Showing up one time does not move the needle. So if we want to hold elected officials accountable, we do that by talking to voters. And we do that by finding candidates we believe in and doing the work to support them. So that's why it's really important you give us your information so that we can call you and say, it's time to hold these people to account. It's time to make sure that they're rewarded with their couch and not their nice office in Washington, D.C. come 2026. So when we talk about holding holding elected officials accountable, it's a collective action. It takes all of us. And it is not sexy, it's not terribly fun, but it is necessary to get the wins that we need to protect our friends and our neighbors and our family. So there is my big plug to please volunteer between now and 2026, because that is the only way to hold elected officials accountable.
I have heard so many times, and I understand it, Democrats and non-MAGA people say, I just can't talk to them. They won't listen. I've given up. You can't give up. We have to keep talking. We can do it in a civil tone. We can say, are you willing, to our MAGA relatives or whoever it is, are you willing to sit down and talk about it? We need to do that. We need to have those conversations. We're not going to change a lot of minds, but we can sure change enough to change elections.
The thing that I'll add is we have to stop normalizing this crazy. Some folks in our party and folks who mean well walk around and try to normalize the moment that we're in. This is not normal. And we can't talk about it like it's normal. We can have conversations about policy, absolutely. The congressman is absolutely right, and I say this all the time. We can talk about policy, but people don't vote on policy. They just don't. It's nice to think so. My wife and I, this is going to be a shameless plug, so bear with me for a second, because we've been together today 21 years. And she's here tonight for 21 years, being together 21 years. It's going to cost me in the end, but that's okay. When we met, did I have heart flutters? Yes. It could have been just heartburn. But at the end of the day, I believed it was something different. And my life was changed for the better. I operated not on, logic. I operated on emotion, that I wanted something to be better. And I was right. That's how people vote. And as the congressman said, too many times in elections especially, we bring a 20-page document to the table and say, here's what we're doing for you. What Donald Trump did brilliantly, and I don't like to say that often, was not that he talked about policy. He created the space for people to be angry about the thing they were angry about. In 2019, or 2023, Andy Barr gave people the space to talk about the concerns that they had, and then said, and here's what we're gonna do for you. But he created that space, and so often that's what we have to do. We have to create that space. But we also have to not treat this moment and these next 4 years as if they are normal. And so some of our responses are gonna feel a little odd for us, but we're gonna have to get out of our comfort zone, because the other side is playing by a rule book that they are making up every day, and we can't play. We can't play on their rule. We can't play on their rule, but we damn sure can create our own. That is not the same thing we continue to do. I'll also say this: we also have to show up. There are far too many communities. If we want to hold people accountable, part of that is that we have to show up, and we can't just show up 2 months before an election and talk about how important you are, insert constituency group. And part of how folks continue to get elected, like Andy Barr, is that when that happens, good folks stay home. And their folks, mobilized by the thought of the bad that they can do, come out and vote. We should hold Andy Barr accountable to the fact that he has not shown up to the people to which he is beholden to, which is the constituents. I read in the newspaper, or online, it was one of them, that part of the reason he didn't want to show up was out of concerns for security, which is funny to me because I didn't hear his concern about the folks who breached the Capitol because they were upset about the outcome of the election. Somehow the pardons for them were okay, but showing up to peaceful Kentuckians is a bridge too far. So let me just level set something for Andy Barr. I have lived in this district, but for the first 9 years of my life. I have lived here the entirety of my life. I'm a 43-year-old black man, married to a white woman with 5 kids, who is the head of the Kentucky Democratic Party in a state that Donald Trump won by 30 points. If I can show up, Andy Barr. Then the excuses run hollow. Those are the kinds of things. I don't say that to be, boastful. But we don't talk as we would say in the black community. Democrats aren't used to talking with bass in their voice. We try to just get along and say, we're going to try to be respectful. Everything I just said was respectful, and it was true. And if Andy is offended by that, I'm offended by the fact that we have to do this because he has shirked his responsibility to the people of the 6th District. But we have to call that stuff out.
Y'all got spicy Coleman tonight. Okay. Judith Humble from Lexington. Judith? Oh. Judith? No Judith? All right, Judith. Guess we weren't fun enough for her. Okay, Nancy Z from Wilmore. Nancy, I cannot pronounce your last name. I apologize. Lucas, will you get her a microphone?
Hi, thank you. I feel like all my questions have already been answered. So I'm going to say something that isn't on the card. I look around this crowd tonight and I'm glad to see so many people here, but we are, most of us, of a certain age. And I'm wondering what we can do. I have a 27-year-old daughter who tells me Social Security isn't going to be there when I'm ready to retire. I can't afford to buy a house. She's paying our student loans. She works really hard. How can we get more young people involved in this? How can we recruit them to run for office? What are we doing to get more young people involved? Because this is the world we gave them. We've screwed up bad if we back down to trying office. And we need to get them, I don't know what to do. I don't know what we can do to get more young people more hopeful.
That's a tremendous question, and it's something I know we all think about. Morgan and I think about it a great deal. Part of it is recognizing that young people are very disinterested in the notion of fidelity to a political party. And so, well, not with Obama, but here's the truth, and I love President Obama, so let me just put that disclaimer out. We can't treat President Obama's time in office and campaign as if it is the norm, right? Because at the end of the day, people were, and look, I met President Obama when he was senator because of this guy. He showed up to campaign for you, I think, when you were running for the House, and that was the first time I got to meet him. But he was kind of a singular event, you know. It was kind of like seeing this meteor that just was just amazing to see. And it was great to bring people to the table for a while. But if you talk to young people today, and Morgan and I especially do a lot, and I should note, you know, we are bringing young people into the party. We've got high school Democrats now, and young Democrats, and college Democrats. But what really brings young people to politics right now are the issues. That's why you saw so many young people show up, and I believe will continue to show up, when the battle was around women's reproductive rights. When the battle has been about, not tripping over ourselves into culture war issues, but understanding that when the right and MAGA vilify people for who they are, loving who they love, living their authentic self, wanting to have more rights than the rapists that violate them, that is not a Democrat or Republican or independent issue. That is just a matter of being decent, being a decent human being. When we bring that out, there was a Republican on the news the other day, Republican member of Congress, who, when asked about the hollowing out of the Department of Education and the feeding programs especially, he was asked, he said, the reporter said, well, you know, what do you say to people who would say, you know, there are kids who rely on these feeding programs during the breaks and during summer for meals? What would you say to those people who are worried about those kids? And his response was, tell those 14, 15, 16-year-olds to get a job. To get a job, because if they don't, those programs are just gateways to welfare. How I found out about that was all of these young people were sending it to me and saying, These are my friends that they're talking about. These are my siblings that they're talking about. And so I think part of the way that we bring young people to the table is that we, one, listen to them. I remember being a young person trying to get into party politics and being, not proverbially, but literally patted on my head saying, oh, that's so cute. So one, we have to show up and listen and give space for folks, for young people to not only sit at the table, but be heard and be active and contribute in ways that they can see themselves reflected in the movement that we're doing. But secondly is, these issues matter. And we have to be on the right side of the issues. I remember talking, and I believe you did serve with Congressman John Yarmuth. And you talked to him about the trajectory of his life, right? As a young freedom fighter. The trajectory of his life making good trouble started at being a young person involved in one of the most critical moments and issues that defined our nation. And the fact of the matter is, the call to action hasn't changed. So we have to give way to those young people for their voices to be heard and to create the space, I believe, for it not just to be lip service that we hear those issues, but that we're moving on those issues, that we're creating space to win on those issues, and to your point, that we're not giving them the country that exists. We're not leaving them the country that exists, but that we're giving them the country they deserve. And those are two totally different things.
I just add a couple of things. One is, this generation of young people, when we're talking about 18 to 29, has had beaten into them for a long time now that government doesn't help them. That government is not relevant to their lives. They shouldn't count on government. And so they've become disinterested to a large extent. I mean, I go teach a course at the University of Louisville. I'm a visiting scholar in UK. I come up here 5 or 6 times a semester, meet with students. They're a great inspiration to me. There are young people out here who really care and want to be engaged. But again, it's an education job that we have to talk about what government means to them. I mean, when I was serving, I was in over 300 schools from kindergarten to college. And I would always take a time, not with kindergartners, but sometimes with 5th and 6th graders, talking about trying to let people know. I said, are you all planning to go to college? And virtually everybody would say yes. I said, most of you statistically are going to need a student loan to go to college. Do you know who makes that student loan you? The federal government. Do you know who decides what interest rate you pay? The federal government. Do you know what terms of forgiving those loans are set by? The federal government. I've been talking about Social Security and Medicare and their grandparents and so forth. So people get a sense of what the government means to them on a daily basis, and that's not just lost on young people, it's lost on a lot of people, but they're interesting things. My pollster for years would tell me when she would poll issues as to what's the most important thing to you in a political race, and everybody puts the economy in there, and whenever the economy's in there, that rate's high. And unfortunately, gun safety used to rate very low, even though it's now increasing in its significance. But she said, when you put retirement security in a poll, it always polls number 1. And she said, and you know who it polls most positively with, or most important with to young voters? You know why? Not because they don't think they're going to get Social Security when they're older. They don't want their parents to move in with them. So the point is, there's some opportunities probably for us to talk about issues that we don't really even think about, but that are on young people's minds, and we need to do a better job of figuring those out too.
I think I just saw my 15-year-old look up for the first time tonight, like, no, daddy and mom, no, that is very true.
Yeah, my parents are in the audience too, and they already know they're gonna go to a home one day. Okay, all right, the next question is from Noah C. in Lexington. Hi, Noah.
Hi, how are you? Hi, I'm Noah Cornett, originally from Eastern Kentucky, live in Lexington now. And the current trend that I've seen for the Democratic Party has been to move farther and farther to the right over the last 20 years. And I'm wondering if that is the trajectory that is going to continue. The current approval rate of the Democratic Party is sitting somewhere around 21%, lowest it's ever been. And if you want to know what get young people excited, Bernie Sanders in 2016 is an excellent example of that. And he's a socialist. He runs the Democratic Party. I personally represent the Democratic Socialists of America out of the Bluegrass chapter. If anyone wants to come to a meeting, let me know. And we want to work with the Democrats, but what we have seen and what I believe we'll continue to see is a further move to the right. Can you assure me that that's not going to happen? And that you guys are going to build coalition with people on what you would consider maybe even the far left, socialists, in order to make positive change in the country?
First of all, I'm going to challenge the premise of the question to a certain extent. I totally reject the idea of describing something as right, left, or center. Those terms mean absolutely nothing today. The Republican Party is not a conservative party. They're the most radical party right now. The MAGA word is the most radical political party that's ever been in this country. And because they're trying to dismantle the federal government. And so I don't know what you call that. It's certainly not conservatism. You come up with a lot of names. What I think it's kind of, I don't think there's any risk of today's Democratic Party becoming anything close to what Reaganism was.
Will you go more center?
And again, I don't know what that term means. I just don't know what it means. I can look at, to me, making sure that everybody has quality, affordable health care is not a liberal agenda. It's a human rights agenda. It's just like I don't think having a strong national defense is a conservative policy. It's what a government is supposed to do. Countries defend themselves or need to be prepared to defend themselves. Do we overdo it? Of course. Do we spend too much money on it? Of course. And we should, Democrats should continue to pressure these people and say, oh, you're willing to cut $880 billion out of Medicaid, or a good portion of that, and yet you want to raise the defense budget by $100 billion and raise the Homeland Security budget, which is what their budget does? I mean, come on. You think there's less fraud and abuse at the Pentagon than there is in Medicare? So, again, I just think it's not helpful to talk about right, center, or left. It's talking about what the proper role of government is and whether, again, you're going to have a government that helps people to make their lives easier or whether you want it to make life harder. And that's, I think, the way we frame it is much more useful than saying, oh gosh, we're afraid of moving to the right. I don't know what anybody knows what that is today.
That was a great question and a great answer. All right, Megan Taylor from Lexington.
Hi, as you just heard, my name is Megan Taylor. I do think that my question has been asked and answered already quite a bit. A big part of what I'm interested in hearing is a little bit more of a concrete answer in terms of how we can get more involved as a party. I do think that the Republican Party is governed by a lot of fear, and fear is incredibly motivating. I think that a lot of people are functioning out of a scarcity mindset, and when we get in that mindset, it's really hard to look outside of what we're getting. So, as a queer woman in a red state, I have utilized that fear, and I've joined the Emerge class of 2025. For those of you that do not know what Emerge is, it is a leadership program that trains Democratic women to run for public office. I am really excited to see a lot more people my age and younger getting involved, but I do see a lot of lack of energy, a lot of hopelessness kind of showing up in my community and the people around me, and so I guess I'm really just interested in hearing how to combat that scarcity mindset. I hear you speaking a lot about what we can do based off of what the right thing is to do, but I think that that gets overshadowed once we do start to experience that scarcity mindset.
I'm gonna speak just for a second because these two need to talk about it more than I do. But one of the things we need to do as a party is to get rid of a lot of people who have been running the party. And I love Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer and Jim Clyburn. They're dear friends of mine. They were great to me. All three of them are 84 right now. They probably stayed around too long in their leadership positions, but at least a couple years ago they deferred to a younger group. We in Kentucky have two pretty young people here who I think have a better vision for the country, for the state, for our party, and we need people who are thinking futuristically in our party because the world is changing far more rapidly than most people can deal with, and we need agile minds and younger minds who can think that way, and that I think will also engage a lot of different people in democratic activities and get support for the democratic agenda. I mean, while we are not focused like a laser beam in every aspect of our society on artificial intelligence and what it means for this country right now and what it's going to continue to mean, we're dooming our own future if we don't focus on this like crazy. And I think that people like Morgan and Coleman can provide the leadership that can have that perspective.
Well, thank you for that. Number one, you're doing an amazing thing by joining Emerge. I'm an Emerge alum. I know our Lieutenant Governor is an Emerge alum too. I see some Emerge alums sitting in the front row, and that's an amazing space to start. It's interesting, I always hear men say, there's no Emerge for men. And I'm like, y'all have had it made for centuries. So, I think as a party, I don't disagree with the congressman that we need to get a lot more new leadership within our party infrastructure. And you said that fear is a great motivator. And I would say that a lot of people who have been coming to these town halls are motivated by fear, and they're motivated by anger. And it's our job, not only as leadership of the party, but as attendees at these type of events, to really turn that anger into action, right? Because again, it's too important. We can't simply show up on election day and think that that is going to get the job done, because it hasn't. And so for us, Coleman and I constantly think about how can we reach communities that we've lost. Whether that's rural Kentucky or inner cities or immigrant communities, it's about mobilizing in every single community and meeting voters where they are, but we need people to do that. We have, at the KDP, we have 7 people on staff in 120 counties. So that is why I will constantly preach the importance of volunteering and not showing up just once. To ask a question, to get out, and which you are, through Emerge, to get out and do more. Everyone can do more. My 70-something-year-old mother loves to canvass. She loves to knock on doors. And she's not young, except in spirit. But the problem is that more people her age want to do more of the work than people my age. So anybody that's in the audience tonight, you would help not only us at the party, but you would help your state and your country if you went out and talked to voters starting now, because we have stuff you can do right now. You don't have to wait till election year. But then if you talk to 5 of your friends and ask, why aren't you doing the work? If you're pissed off, why aren't you doing something about it? Because that is how we show up, and that's how we harness people's anger and turn that into action, which then makes change, right? Organizing is all about building people power, but if you don't have people, you can't have the power. So it's so important for us to exist in these spaces like tonight, but also to get out and pound the pavement and make phone calls and send text messages, because that is where the real change happens. And if you talk to me, you're gonna hear that about 20 times. I will not let you exit a conversation with me until you have told me how you are going to volunteer to help Democrats win in 2026 and beyond. And that is what I challenge each and every one of you all to have those kind of conversations with your friends and family. And if you don't know what to do or how to be involved, come find us, because I will put you to work, and he definitely will put you to work. So we're here to be a resource, and the more people we can get out on the pavement, the more Democrats we will elect, and the better our state and our country will be for it.
Drag your kids and grandkids with you. Challenge your kids and grandkids to get involved. Take them with you. Challenge them to get involved. Do the education job with them as to, hey, this means something to your lives. And I know it's hard to convince a 15-year-old that they should be thinking about that, but that's an important parental and grandparental role.
It is, and I've got my 7-year-old, my 15-year-old, my 14-year-old, my 13-year-old back here, and I didn't have to actually force them to come. Now, again, that may cost me when we leave here, but I'm proud of them for wanting to be a part of this and understanding. It's not about what dad is telling you is important to your life. The thing about it is that they can see it for themselves. They're online enough that they can see the devastation of the Trump agenda. Unfortunately, they walk in circles, sometimes in their own schools, where they hear things and are subjected to things that Trump 2.0 has normalized in ways that should never have been normalized. And to the previous question, has given space for us to, I guess in MAGA terms, go back to America's greatness, which for a whole bunch of us was not America's greatest moments. Specifically to your question though, MAGA only wins if we're afraid. They relish in creating the circumstances in which, because we are different, and different can be defined in whatever skin you sit in, they relish in that, because the more we are afraid to be out and in our communities and mobilizing and organizing and vocalizing both our fears and our demands for change and for a better future. The more that they create the circumstance that we're fearful of doing that, the greater reach they have to do all of the evil and the destruction and the chaos that they are doing. And so I'm just gonna be very vulnerable. It is scary. There's not a day. I've been chair of this party for almost 5 years. There's not a day that I've woken up in those 5 years that I've not been fearful of something. I'm the first person of color to lead a major political party in the history of this Commonwealth. That should, and I say that to as a flex. That I'm not that brilliant. I should have been the first. I live in that reality. But I also live in the reality that every day there is someone out there who could come at me in ways that I may not be able to go back to my family. And that is a crap way to have to live in existence of simply wanting to participate in the political process, a process by which, since we live in a world where MAGA and Republicans like to think that we are so past the need to recognize that we are not we have not achieved all of the equity and equality that we should. My grandparents and my parents were born, and I'm 43, were born in this nation without having the right to vote. It is not a construct of some historical, way long time ago. I can talk to my mother about not being able to vote. I can talk to my mother about my grandmother being arrested for trying to vote. And so the other thing that I would say to that, though, is that we stand on the shoulders of people who were fearful and still showed up. And so history is cyclical in a lot of ways. But the way that I would kind of say to you is that the cyclical part of history in this moment is there are so many points in our past that have shown us how to mobilize, how to so many movements weren't started in rooms like this. They were started in dorm rooms. They were started at coffee tables. They were started at 3rd Street stuff down the street. There's this belief that it has to be something big and dynamic because we live in a world where we're so connected because of social media and the internet that it has to be this big, ginormous thing. It does not. I'm a person of faith. My faith teaches me we're 2 or more gathered. We're 2 or more gathered. And so it may feel scary. It will feel scary. It will be scary. But the question that I always lead with is, if I do nothing, will I be able to sleep at night? And the answer to that is no. No. So being involved in Emerge is a huge step. Thank you so much. Part of the responsibility now that I say every year I speak to the new class of Emerge is, who are you bringing with you? Who's coming after you? Oh, you got it next to you. Good, good. But that is for all of us. That's for all of us. Because MAGA wants us to be afraid. I tell the story all the time. I would run into people at Kroger, right? And they would be Democrats. They know I'm a Democrat. They don't want to be in public talking as Democrats. So it'd be like this secret language. It'd be like, can you meet me in the Kroger frozen food aisle? And then we'll talk about the election. Do not be afraid to stand in your truth. We are on the right side of justice. Don't be afraid. Every moment we're afraid, we're giving them oxygen. And I said this the other day, I'll be damned if my grandparents marched and went to jail to give me a better quality of life, only to hand my children a worse quality of life than I had. And so we cannot be so afraid that we sit in silence, resigned to an outcome that is not a necessary. Donald Trump succeeding is not a necessary, and it only is it only is inevitable if we sit and do nothing out of fear. My kids love Marvel. I love to think of Donald Trump as Thanos. He believes he is inevitable. But if you saw the end of the movie, he is not. Consider yourselves Avengers. Level up.
I hope I'm not the only one who did not understand that reference. Okay, we are going to take one last question. And I was filtering through, and it is hard. You all asked some good ones. But we're going to go with David O'Brien from Lexington.
that day to humiliate this nation. And it can be small things, insignificant things like, we're going to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico. We're going to make Canada the 51st state. Or something more serious, because he is serious about it. We're going to annex Greenland. One way or another. But it used to be that I thought the courts would save us. But this court, having been so politicized, principally by our senior senator from Kentucky, Mitch McConnell, yes. Some of the things that have come down, like Citizens United, and we are trending toward a number of things. One of them is we're trending toward oligarchy. There's too much money in politics. There's too much money concentrated in just a few people. Elon Musk bought a presidency. In my opinion. He is, in fact, a co-president, or seems to be. My question to you all is, what can be done to get over this dependence on money and the concentration of money in so few people?
There are three different issues there. The courts, Citizens United, and then the concentration of wealth in the country. All topics that we could talk about for a long time. I want to address the court issue, and I'm cautiously optimistic. Not just because of the 46 rulings that have gone against the Trump administration already, but because it looks like John Roberts is becoming more and more concerned about the integrity of the court. And I'll give you, well, no, believe me, I wish he weren't Chief Justice, but better than Clarence Thomas or Alito. And here's another case that's recent that gives me some hope. There's a case there's a small town in Oklahoma, not medium-sized town, 30,000 people, and they passed a law to allow public funding of a Catholic school. Not vouchers being able to be used in a public school, public funding of a Catholic school. It's a virtual school, but it's public. This was a concept that was pushed by two law professors at Notre Dame. They created this issue because they wanted to get a case to the Supreme Court. The Oklahoma Supreme Court ruled that unconstitutional, so they said you can't do that. So they appealed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has it now. Amy Coney Barrett, who is a former colleague of the two law professors, has recused herself from the case. That says to me that at least they're starting to think about the ramifications to the credibility of the court, of some of these decisions. So I'm somewhat optimistic. The question of comprehensive wealth is, we've created an economy that has become a rental economy, they call it. So it's no longer, you no longer make lots of money by working hard. You make lots of money by reaping interest and dividends and returns off of other people's work. And that's what's happened with, and of course social media is a whole different animal. But there are lots of aspects to that problem. One of is antitrust. I mean, I saw the other day where Google bought a company that I had never heard of. Has anybody heard of Wiz? $37 billion. $37 billion they paid for a company. I have no idea what they do. Now, we have antitrust laws to actually deal with that kind of thing. and we need to start enforcing them. This administration is not going to do it. But this is generations in the making now, and I don't have the answer to it other than we need to change the tax code. We got to do away with carried interest, which allows very wealthy people to be taxed at 15% on multiple, like my college classmate Steve Schwarzman, who makes $700 or $800 million a year, pays 15% tax rate. We got to change that law. But there are actually some Democrats who have been a problem in that area. Kirsten Sinema being one when she was in the Senate. She stopped us from doing something. She and West Virginia guy, Joe Manchin, they stopped us from actually dealing with that. So it's not totally Republican fault, but so there are policy things, and that's total federal policy basically with some of the accumulation of wealth. And Citizens United, I introduced, along with a lot of other people, constitutional amendment after it was passed to change the Constitution to try to overturn that law. We're not going to be able to do that. It's almost impossible, well, it is impossible basically to have a constitutional amendment pass on anything right now. But here's my hope with, in terms of money in politics. What people are finding out, Morgan and Coleman can contradict me if they think I'm wrong, is that the reasons we took, historically, over the last couple of generations, have raised so much money is because we spend a lot of money on television. And television has basically become one of the least efficient ways to reach voters. And there are far more economical ways to do it. There's a company in Louisville called El Toro, which is which has they do like 6,000 elections around the world. They're able to, if you want to talk to people about student loan forgiveness and you want to reach through their social media universe, you want to reach members of, whether it's a congressional district or whatever, who have student loans or who have grandkids with student loans or have kids with student loans, they can reach them directly with a tailored message at very, very inexpensive rates. And there are a lot of people doing things related to that. So, and what you're seeing is campaign budgets where when I ran the first time, which was 2006, 80% of our budget went to television. Now campaigns are spending 50% or less on television. So, and I think that's going to continue. The only people who watch television and see the ads are our generation. And by the way, we're not persuadable voters. We already know how we're going to vote. They're not reaching us. And so I think there's a different perspective that's coming toward how much money do we need to run campaigns? And some districts are harder to run in than others. Louisville is a simple district, one media market, 30 minutes from one end to the other. It's different than if you're running statewide in Kentucky and you've got the Cincinnati media market, the Huntington, West Virginia media market, the Nashville market, the Evansville market, the Louisville market, the Lexington market. You got to worry about all those ways of communicating. Modern technology is changing all that. And so I'm hoping that that's going to change kind of the demand for so much money in politics, and needs to. Now, is it going to prevent somebody with obscene amounts of money like Elon Musk from buying a government, which is what he did? He didn't just buy an election, he bought a government. And he's spending $10 million on a Supreme Court race in Wisconsin right now. Is it going to stop that? I don't think it will stop the spending. I think it will stop the effectiveness of the spending.
Good question, David. Okay, I know we're running short on time, or we're running out of time, so I'm just gonna toss it to John and let him wrap up for us.
Well, first of all, thanks to all of you for being here. Thanks for having me. This is kind of my first campaign type thing in a long time. And, get back in the game. I do enjoy the classrooms, but this is more fun. Thanks, Heather. But I think we've said everything there is to be said. This ultimately is a very treacherous moment in the history of this country. I had a colleague who some of you may have heard of named David Obey. David was from Madison, Wisconsin, served for 42 years in the House, was chairman of the Appropriations Committee. And David and I became pretty good friends because probably nobody else would talk to David because he's pretty curmudgeonly, but we were talking a couple of years ago and during the first Trump administration and bemoaning many of the things we're talking about tonight. And he said to me, John, democracy doesn't guarantee a happy ending. And those words are emblazoned on my mind because that's where we are. As I said, I felt that way in 2019, and it's far worse now. It's far worse because you got the same guy in the White House. I think he's gotten crazier and crazier, and I have no qualms about saying this guy is not right. He has numerous mental problems, including being a malignant narcissist, and a pathological liar, and somebody who's had arrested development. He's never aged emotionally since he was 12 years old. I mean, there are psychiatrists who have said the same thing. I'm not making that up. But what he's done is created an atmosphere around him, an infrastructure in his government where there are no constraints on him. And while we talked about the courts, and I'm afraid, I do have concerns about the courts, even though I'm cautiously optimistic. Here's the other thing that I worry about. Who's going to enforce the federal law?
Exactly.
If you run the Justice Department, and you can tell the Attorney General and all the people in the Justice Department whom to prosecute and whom to leave alone, the rule of law is gone in this country. And there are lots of things to be afraid of. And again, this infrastructure is what sets this time apart from his first term. The immediate answer for us, the immediate goal, I should say, is taking the House back in 2026. We don't know what's going to happen in special elections, but I'm assuming that the special elections will turn out to be that the seats will remain in the party's hands, and they did. If that's the case, we have to flip 3 seats. 3 seats in the entire country in order to take control of the House of Representatives back, and to the extent that the House controls anything, it does control the budget. No spending can happen without the House of Representatives. And so if we can make the 6th District of Kentucky one of those 3, we will have changed the country. We will have saved the country, possibly. When I ran in 2006, I was not looking for a new job. But my thought process was back then, I was very much opposed to the agenda of George W. Bush. And I said at the time, we needed to flip 15 seats that year to change control of the House. I said, if I can be one of those 15, then I don't care whether I like the job or not. I will have done something important to stop George Bush. And it turned out we flipped 41 seats. But ours, because we closed the polls early, mine was the first. So that was, that was the first that night. But we've got a lot at stake here in 2026. And I think one of the things that both Morgan and Coleman have said that's important, and I was in a meeting with Ken Martin, a new Democratic national chairman, the other day, and he said, politics is no longer seasonal. It is a year-round venture. It never stops, and we can't stop. So just to just beat a dead horse. Shouldn't talk about dead horses in Lexington. Dead horse. We need to get to work today and do as much as we can to lay the groundwork to where there are actual candidates in the race, so we can get behind those candidates. But we need to talk about all of these things, and again, help to the extent we can, educate people we have access to in what's at stake. What's at stake for the country, what's at stake for them. Because everybody has something on the line here. Whether it's veterans, Bud was talking about, whether it's Medicaid patients, people in nursing homes, whether it's college students trying to afford college, whether it's education, oh my God. The environment's at stake. Basically everything is. And we have a petty dictator in the White House right now who doesn't listen to anybody, but who has everybody intimidated. We need to stand up with everybody we can. Say, as Coleman said, don't be afraid. Get busy. So thanks again for having me. Let's all get busy. We're all freedom fighters now. Okay? Thank you.
Like I have to persuade anybody here, right? They go with you? Go ahead and take it.
I didn't try to get like young Dims. How did you talk about us? That's such a good group. You should
I'm aware.
Go find that lady.
I'm going to question it.
Oh.
Somebody deserves care.
Thanks.
I was
Well, that's fair. Am I saving your picture?
But get my number.
Okay.
Okay, get the phone number.